I'd like to begin this presentation on the Jobs module by looking at the Project Manager's Role Center. That's what we're looking at here. And if you notice, it focuses on the Jobs area because that's the area that is designed within Business Central to do project management. And in this Role Center, we can see that we have certain tiles here, and these tiles reflect the number of documents that we have in each of these kind of buckets or categories that we as a project manager may need to deal with. So I have upcoming invoices 1 here. I have invoices due to create. I have 3 of these that should be created for me now. I have an open timesheet. And there are lots of tiles here that will reflect current tasks and current things that I need to do. I'm going to scroll back up a little bit, and we're going to actually just open up the Jobs tab here and look at the Jobs list view. Now there are 3 jobs that are out here in this Kronos database. This is just a sample database that comes with Business Central. I'm going to open this particular job up. And this is the General tab. And I want to show you a few things on the General tab that will be of some interest to you. First of all, we have a job number that gets assigned to it. We have the customer for which we are doing the job. This is customer 30,000. It's the School of Fine Arts. And it brings up their address, city, state, zip, so on and so forth. We have a contact and an email address for them. And then most importantly, over on the other side, we have an external document number, which is typically the customer's PO number for this job. We have the person that's responsible for the job. So this is the ultimate manager of this job, ultimate responsibility. We also have a project manager. So the project manager is the person who's really in charge of the project. They usually report up to the ultimate supervisor, who is the person really responsible for the job. If we scroll down just a little bit here, we come down to some other areas. I want to look at the posting area for a moment. So the status of this particular job can be in the planning stage. It can be a quote. It can be open, where I'm actually recording transactions against it, or it can be complete. So we have these 4 various statuses that a job goes through in its life cycle. We have a WIP method. So this is something important for the accounting group. The WIP for this particular contract is being recorded as a completed contracts method. I could also have percentage of completion, and these are the 2 most common ways on which contracts are accounted for. But then you can also do sale value, or cost of sales. So the typical ones that you're going to be using, and you probably actually only use one of these, but it would be completed contracts or percentage of completion for the majority of your contracts out here. Down in the lower area down here, one of the things that's kind of interesting is that I can have a bill to customer, and this is the default customer, but I also could select another customer. So if I'm doing this job for an organization, but it has a parent organization that we actually send the invoices to, I could select another customer here and then actually do the billing to them. I can set up payment terms, ship to addresses, the contact for the shipments themselves. The duration of this, is it a month, is it 6 months, whatever it may be. So I actually can set up what the starting and ending dates for this should be. And then if I'm dealing with a company that deals with foreign currencies, I could set this contract up to be done in Canadian dollars, euros, any of a number of currencies that we have available within Business Central. So some very flexible features within the job card itself. I'm going to scroll back up to the center portion of this, where we actually have the structure of the job. So up here I have what are called job tasks, and these tasks are highlighted. And I can have, I can make this as simple or as complex as I want to. This has a phase. So I have phase 1, and this is where it begins. And I can put a marker on this that says, hey, this is the beginning of a totaling section. And then I can have planning lines that fall within this. So here I'm going to do some consulting work. I'm going to review and sign off the project. That's going to be the end of phase 1. And so this particular line is an ending total. And I can tell it, hey, for this section I'm going to total lines 1000 through 1099. So it's totaling up these lines in the center here. So I have a beginning total, I have an ending total, and in between I have these planning lines that actually are posting accounts that I can actually post transactions to. And I can build as many of these phases as I want to, and I can have as many planning lines in between these as I choose. And this provides a detailed structure of how I can divide up my project into various phases and determine at which phase I'm making or losing money. And this gives me a nice structure for my job. So this is a relatively sophisticated job where I have phases of my project and so on and so forth. I'm going to close this up for a moment. I'm going to take a look at this job. And this job is an extremely simple example where I have virtually no beginning and ending totals. There's no phases. I simply have a sequence of events that I have that I'm going to record expense against. And so this is the simplest kind of way to set up a job, and probably not as typical as the first one that I showed you where you actually have phases set up. So underneath each of these job planning lines is some detail. So let's lift up the hood here and take a look at how this actually works. So I'm going to go to job planning lines. And here we have the actual job planning line for that 10,010, 10,020. So these were the two lines that we had that were showing up on the front page. And if you notice, this is a line type of both budgeted and billable, which means that anything that happens here, I'm going to compare my budget to my actual cost. I also could have just a budget, or I could have just a billable. So if this was an expense that I was going to incur that I didn't want to go against my budget, I could just pick billable here. If it was a sales that took place that I didn't want to go against the budget, I could just pick budget. So it allows me to decide how I'm going to account for each of these lines. So I have a planned date for the line. I have a type here of a resource. So this is an actual person or event that's going to be taking place. This could be, I could set up a resource to be something like printing or postage, and use that as a resource. I can have resource items, I can have GL account numbers, and I can have text. If you notice, this one is just text, and it's just it isn't to anything except to put in a line of text that says review designs. For each of these lines, I can have quantities. So here I have 20 hours of Catherine's time that I plan on billing to this at $50 per hour. And so I arrive at a total cost, a total unit price, and a total line amount here. I have other fields out here that contain posting groups indicating what GL account numbers these are going to post to, just like we do with other posting groups within BC. So each of these lines are detailed with quantities, units of measure, whether they're pieces, items, whatever. This happens to be an item. I'm selling some guest chairs along with this particular project. And so I can use items in the planning lines as well. So items, resources, GL lines, and text fields. And the sum total of all of this details out and shows me exactly what my project is going to be budgeted for, and then what the actual costs are that will accumulate against it as the project goes on. From the main menu, when I'm in the Project Manager's Role Center, if I click on Jobs, you'll see that we actually have 3 jobs out here. And if I escape out of here and I do a search for jobs, and I pick this from the jobs list, now what you'll see is that there actually are more jobs out here than just the 3 that were shown. And the reason for that is that if I take a look at this job, any of these bottom 3, I'm assigned, I'm the admin on this system, that's why I'm logged in. I'm assigned as the project manager on these, where if I go to this one, for example, I'm not assigned as the project manager, so it isn't filtered for me to view inside of my role center. So the nice thing about these role centers are that this shows me just the stuff that I need to pay attention to, things that are assigned to me. So let's take a look now at how we can apply the jobs programs to your specific needs. So this is a sheet that was sent to me, and in here there are, I've not recreated this entire sheet, but I've recreated these two sections, the website requirements and the call center requirements. And so here we wound up with a subtotal of $10,280, and down here $13,000, and we had each of these various line elements that were involved in this particular project. So if I minimize the Excel spreadsheet here, let's go to jobs, and I've created a job template out here that I call the Angion template number 1. So I'm going to open this up, and I've created this for a customer 10,000, which the customer is really pretty irrelevant for this this illustration. And what I want to do is go down to this the area where we have the tasks, and as you can see, I've created a website requirements, and then I've created a call center requirements, and we have a beginning total and an ending total for each of these two sections. I also created a third section down here that I called Phase 3. And the reason I did this is I've got a couple of things down here that I want to be able to illustrate for you that aren't necessarily part of these two phases, if you will, of the project that you have. From the Excel spreadsheet, the website requirements was a total of $10,280, and the call center requirements were a total of $13,000. So you can see that I basically have constructed this as your project in your Excel spreadsheet was. But what I want to show you is that there's a few things that we can do here. Let's just take a look at this line. So if I wanted to see the actual cost and how the cost is constructed for this one line, I could pick line. I could go to job and planning line, and now I see the actual line that makes up the total for this. So I've allocated this to a GL account number, which is in the sales area, but I gave it a description of setup fees for the Angion group, and I'm going to put an E in here because I've misspelled this. A quantity of 1, a unit cost of $1,250, and a unit price of $69.50. So this is my selling price. This is what we're going to charge the customer. This is my cost for this particular item. And I drew that up by using the costs that were on your line here of $6,900. I don't know what your cost was. I just assigned $1,250 to it so that I could get a cost. But your selling price to the customer was the $69.50. And so in most of the cases that we have out here, I've assigned some cost just so we'll have the cost and be able to record some expense against this. I'm going to close this up, and if I wanted to see all of the costs and how all of the cost is really developed for this, I could go to related jobs and show planning lines, and I'm going to see all of the planning lines. So this is exactly how everything that I have put out here, how it's constructed. So I have my task numbers. These are both budgeted and billable. This one is just billable. This one's just, there's a couple that are just billable and one is just budget. But the majority of these are, I'm going to be tagging, hey, I want to have a budget and I want to compare the expense against that budget. I've used a combination of GL account numbers, resources. Here I've set up a resource for this IVR operation system, and resources for these, GL account number, and down here we actually have an item. So we'll be able to show you how you can create purchase orders for these, and then how they will automatically update the job when they're received. So I'm going to close this up for a moment, and then I'm going to escape out of here, and we're going to look at how we can actually use this template now. So this template is J00070. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project, and it'll assign a number. which is 80. I'm going to use the same customer, and you can assign any customer that you, this is a test of template. I'm going to use customer 10,000 for this. It's not going to make any difference. You can use any customer that you want to here. But what I want to do is that there are no planning lines here. Really, there's virtually nothing here. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to copy this. So I can go to Actions, Copy Job Tasks from Tasks page. So I'm going to open this up. And it wants to know what job I want to copy from. And what I'm going to give it is 70, my template. So I'm going down, I'm going to pick this. And I could copy just specific tasks that I want to, from one number to the next. I'm going to copy them all. I'm going to copy quantities with it, so I could leave the quantities blank if I wanted to. And I'm also going to copy dimensions here. I'm going to simply say OK. And this is now going to, it says the job was successfully copied. And now my new job of J000080 has the same tasks, the same planning lines. It has everything here that you had in your template. So everything is available for you to begin working on this. Now you can go in and edit this. You could add lines, delete lines, do whatever you wanted to. But you now have eliminated all the work of recreating all of the project sections that were in your template. So I'm going to go back up to the top of my project here. I'm going to set myself up as the project admin so that this will appear on my dashboard. And one of the first things that I want to look at in this new project that I have here is one of the things that we talked about at the beginning of our last session. That is project pre-billing. So I have this line set up, and I want to actually take a look at this line. So I'm going to look at the project planning line here that's underlying this. And I've set this up as a GL chart of account going to a sales account. And you would set this up to whatever sales account you want to. And I've called this for a description of project pre-billing here. And what I want to do with this is I want to send out an invoice at the beginning of the project to my customer so that I'll get paid on this. And then once I'm paid, I'll actually begin working on their project. So I'm going to drop back out of here for just a moment, and I want to show you one other thing before I actually create the invoice for this. What I want to show you before we go any farther is that if I pick reports and preview a job quote, I can actually print out a quote for this particular job, and I can just preview this on the screen. Can make this larger, and as you can see, here are my two different phases: website requirements for $10,280, and then I have the cellular requirements, a total $13,000. Then down in this other area, I also have a couple of other tasks that I wanted to show you about. But you can actually print out a quote to your customer based upon the template that you've created. So I've closed the report and gone back to my job journal tasks here. And what I want to do is I want to take a look at this pre-billing task. This is one of the first things we talked about. And if I go to the detail of that planning line, and I have this line highlighted, what I can do here is that I can go to Process. And from here, I could create a job journal line with this. I could create a sales invoice. I could open a job journal. I could create a sales credit memo, or I could view sales invoices and credit memos. So all I'm going to do here is pick Create Sales Invoice. And I'm going to put a posting date on it of today's date. I'm going to tell it to create a new invoice. Now, if I had an invoice here that I wanted to append this to, I could just pick the append and select the invoice that I already have out here, but I don't have any out here for now. So I'm just going to select OK. And what this will do is it will create a sales invoice for me. It says the lines were successfully transferred to an invoice. And now from here, I can simply go to Process, Sales Invoices, and I can see the sales invoice that was created for this. So this is the sales invoice that I now can send out to my customer for this $7,500 to get my prepayment. So this says project pre-billing, but maybe I have several different projects going on for them. So I could come into here and I could pick a comment line, for example, and it says project pre-billing for project J00080, which now gives them more detail about what this prepayment is actually for. So I'm referencing my job number. I could have a particular construction site here. I could add as many comment lines as I want to. I could put an address in here for the job itself. But the point is that I have everything in here that I need, and now all that I actually need to do is to release this order and to go to post and do a post and invoice on this. And this has now posted my invoice. It asked me if I want to take a look at it. I'm going to say yeah. So I can actually go out and see my posted sales invoice for this amount of money to my customer. So this is a way in which I can do prepayments for my particular job. And what I want to do now is that I actually want to go to related job, and I want to look at all of the planning lines here. And if I drill across on this, I'll be able to actually see now that I've got an invoiced amount here of $7,500 for that one line for the pre-billing. Nothing else on this account has been invoiced yet, but I actually have invoiced out the $7,500 to my customer, so I can see actual sales recorded against my project. So I'm going to close this window up, and what I want to do is to go to the bottom of the job area here. And although we billed this $75 or $7,500, down here in the WIP and recognition area, there's virtually nothing. We don't have anything here, and that's because there are some functions that we have to do to calculate and post WIP periodically, and these typically are done at month end, and then it would do everything all at one time. We're going to do one just for this particular invoice so you can see it. The other thing that I want to show you here is that I've actually set this up so that the billing is to another customer. This is actually being billed to Trey Research instead of the Addendum Corp. So if we go out and take a look at the billing for this, this would actually be to the Addendum Company. So I'm going to close this up for a second, and we're going to go out of here. And what I want to do is I want to look at customer 20,000, which is actually Trey Research. And for Trey Research, if we drop down to the area here where we have balances, so they have a $12,000 balance, you'll see this on 5/30, which was the posting date that I used for this. We have the $7,500 charge. So this invoice actually already appears in the customer ledger entries, and it's in the customer's receivables, but we haven't recognized it on the job itself. So if we go back to our job area here, what we can do is that we can actually run the function to calculate WIP, and we can see how this will actually bring these into the WIP area and to the posted WIP area through General Journal postings. Before we calculate this, we have to have a WIP method here, and I'm going to select completed contracts for this. And I'm going to make sure that I have a job posting group set up in here. And now I'm going to just drop down to the bottom where I have these WIP areas, and up at the top we have some functions. One of them is called WIP. I can hit this and hit calculate WIP. It will ask me for a posting date, or it defaults to a posting date here, and it gives it a document number and so on and so forth, and I can just hit calculate, and it says WIP was successfully calculated. Do you want to preview the posting account? I'm going to say yes. And what this is doing, it's handling our GL account for sales, and this is the $7,500 that we've just invoiced out to the customer. So it says in order to complete this, you have to run the post WIP to GL. I'm going to say no for a moment. And the reason is that I want to show you that this will just come into the WIP side of this, and the GL side isn't filled out. So typically this is run periodically, like monthly, to calculate all of your WIP, bring in all of the transactions into this area, and then finish your posting. I can drill into these lines and still see the transactions that took place, so that I can easily audit my accounting functions. And then again, once this is done, we can post WIP to the GL. I'm just going to click OK, and it says WIP was successfully posted. And as you notice now, the total WIP sales GL amount has moved over to the posted side as opposed to just posted into the WIP area. The next thing that I'd like to look at is how we can manage tasks in here fairly easily. So if I go to related job planning lines and look at all of my job planning lines, some of these lines are set up for monthly maintenance, a monthly minimum charge. So one of the things that we have to do every month is we've got to set up a quantity of 18 of these, but each month we need to bill these. So I can simply go into here and set a filter on the description. And that's why constructing these is kind of important that you do it correctly. If I type in month here and I filter on this, here are my 3 lines that have monthly charges. Now this one is a monthly minimum, but let's just assume that they've hit minimum here. And my quantity is 18 months because I've just started this contract. If I go over here to the right-hand side, I have quantity to transfer to invoice. If I change this to a 1, then I can create an invoice for just 1 monthly charge on this. So I'll create an invoice out here for just the single monthly charges that I have for this. And so I'll get 185.55 and 395. So this makes life a little easier when I go out to try to do these things. What I can do now is here I can just select more of these. So I can select all 3 of these. And then I can process this and create a sales invoice. And when I create this sales invoice, I'm creating it for this month. Next month I obviously had changed the date. And what this is doing for me is that this is actually now created a sales invoice for these amounts. So if I navigate to here, I'll see my sales invoice, and here is my single monthly charge for 185.55 and 395. The next thing that I want to take a look at is this check printing line, and the reason for that is that this line is actually set up as an item. So any of these job planning lines that you set up with type item can either be used from inventory, or purchase orders can be created for these. And what I want to show you here is that I currently have a quantity of 1,500 on here, and the unit price is $1. If I put in 500 here and I tab off of this, notice that the price changes to $1.25. If I change this quantity to 2,500, the price drops to 75 cents that I'm going to be charging to my customer. I'm going to put this back at 1,500, which is what the original amount was, and it goes back to $1. Now the reason for this is that this item is set up with both sale and purchasing discounts based upon a quantity purchase. So if I look at the sale prices for this, what you're going to see is that for all customers, and I could make this specific to a customer, but I've set this up so all customers get this discount. If they purchase 1 to $999, they get $1.25. At 1,000, they get $1, and at over 2,000, they get 75 cents. I can set an effective date when these price records are eligible to begin and when they end. So these price records are valid for a year for all customers. I also have the same kind of thing set up here for the purchasing side. So I have a purchase price, but this is specific to a vendor, and that's the vendor that I buy these checks from. So again, quantity breaks of 1, 1,000, and 2,000, 75 cents, 65, and 55, depending upon the quantity of these that I purchase. This is the purchase price that I'm going to get from my vendor. So I'm going to escape back out of the item card here. And any of these lines, so for example, if I had 10 different items out here that I were purchasing for this that haven't already had purchase orders established for them, this can be done through a program called the Requisition Worksheet. So if I go to the Requisition Worksheet here, and I pick Process, Calculate a Plan, I don't have much out here except I'm going to deal strictly with this check printing item, so I'm looking for a single item at a time. If you leave this blank, it would look for everything that needs to have purchasing done for it for the moment. And I have a starting and ending date that I have out here, and I'm going to click OK. And this brings in my check printing, quantity of 1,500. It has a direct unit cost of 65 cents on this. And it has my vendor of V00030. Now this is a little less than ideal to work with the job module, and for a couple of reasons. I'm not quite sure why Business Central works this way, but it does. So if I go to order tracking on this, it actually shows me that this is for job J00080. This is the current job that I'm working on. What it doesn't have here is it doesn't have the task number. And when I transfer this over to the purchase order system, it does not bring in this job number nor the task line. So in order to make this work properly for you, we would need to make a modification to this program to make sure that when it transfers this, it's aware of what the job number is, but when it transfers this, it's also transferring to the purchase order the job number and the task line number for you. So a little less than ideal out of the box, but a fairly easy and not a big deal to make a modification to this to make it work correctly for you. In the normal course of business, when I'm running this, I would have multiple lines here, probably lots of them. One other thing that the program doesn't do that we should make a change for you on is that it doesn't allow you to filter to a specific job here, and we would want to put a filter on this so that you could filter for just job 80, the one that we're currently using. So if I'm the project manager, I can do all of my purchasing for a single job. So one other customization that we would want to make for you in terms of how to get this in efficiently. Point being, at this point in time, I could change the quantity, I could have multiple lines here, I could change vendors if I wanted to, and when I have all of these lines set correctly, all I do is pick action function and carry out action message, and this will then create my purchase orders for me. I can click this button to have them print them if I choose to. I'm not going to do that, but I could, and I'm just going to say OK here. And this has now created my purchase order for this particular line. Now, unfortunately, this will not have my job and my task number on it, but those fields are available, and so we'll go out and actually add those to the purchase order. So I'm going to close this up, and what I want to do is go to Purchase Orders. And if you notice, I have one PO out here to the Donnelly Company, vendor V00030. And if we go down here, we'll see this is for our check that we just did. And notice, as I said, it does not have a job number. So what I'm going to do is fill this in, and this is a modification that should come across from the requisition worksheet, but it doesn't. And of course it doesn't have the task number here either, so we're going to pick that check printing task number, 1240. And it has a quantity of 1,500 on the line and a unit price of 65 cents. So this has brought everything over just as we would expect it to. And when we receive this, this will then update our job. So I've returned to the job card one more time here. What I want to do is go to Related Job Planning Lines, and I've added a new column to our layout here that says Remaining Quantity. Now the remaining quantity for some of these are 0 because there is no quantity to begin with because you didn't have that in a quote. But if you take a look at our billable, our pre-billing line here, we had 1 and now its remaining quantity is 0 because it's been invoiced. And so when we receive these checks, we should see remaining quantities go to 0 over here. So I just want to show you that before we do the receipt of the purchase order. Now I'm going to close this up now, and I'm going to go back to my purchase order. And I'm going to bring up this purchase order that we have here. If you notice, there's a red asterisk beside the invoice number, so I'm going to put in an invoice number for this. And I'm going to release this purchase order. And now I'm going to just simply receive and invoice this. Go to post, receive an invoice. And this has been posted. I don't want to view the posted invoice. But what I do want to do is return to my job and take a look at it. So I'll open up my job. I'll go to related and planning lines. And if you'll see, we now have 0 remaining for this 1500 because this has actually now been handled, and we can go out and create a sales invoice to invoice our customer for this. I have this job planning line highlighted here. I can go to processes, create sales invoice, put in my posting date for it, and this has successfully created an invoice. So I can go out to process sales invoices and credit memos to see what I have open here. This is my sales invoice for the check printing on this particular job. $1,500 at $1 a piece, so $1,500. I can now post this, and this will update the cost on my job. It'll be ready to be picked up by WHIP, and of course, most importantly, it'll go out to my receivables for this customer and take care of all of the other accounting issues. The last area for us to take a look at is really to look at resource lines. So we've talked about the fact that if we have an item, how we can actually receive these from a purchase order. We could actually, if they weren't on a purchase order, we had these in inventory, we could actually create a sales invoice for them right directly from the line by just processing it. Any of these GL account lines that we have, we can just simply create sales invoices for them. And we've talked about how we can do that by going over here to the quantity to invoice and actually putting on a quantity to transfer to an invoice here, so we can do single ones as opposed to all 18 months at one time. The one piece we haven't talked about is the resource. So here I have a resource set up for Catherine, and it's 20 hours of project management time. And there are several ways that we can deal with resources. The one way that we can do this is to simply highlight this line. We can go to process, and we can indicate, they can just tell it we want to create a job journal line. And if I do this, I can tell it what date I want. The journal is going to be a job journal, and the batch is default, and I can say OK. And this has now transferred this out to my default job journal. I can go to process, and I can go to open job journal, and here is that one line. I need to put a document number on this before I can post it. But here is the one line with the 20 hours of time that we would bill for project management here. Now, typically you wouldn't do this. This would be billed a couple of hours a week or things of that type. So there's a number of other ways that we can actually handle employees going out and allocating their time to jobs. Another way that we can do this is that we could create a job journal out here for, say, each of our employees. I've created a batch here that I'm going to for Tom, and what we're going to do in here is that we're going to enter in a job number. So let's assume that he's working on job 60. His task is the project management, 1220. Resource is Tom. And He put in 8 hours on the 30th. So he's got 8 hours allocated to this job. So we come down here, and on the 1st of June, he works on a different job. He works on 80. And it is the same task, and it's still Tom. And he puts in 4 hours on this. So he literally can go out and record his time in this journal, and hopefully at the end of the week his hours should add up to 40 or whatever he's typically working. But an employee, each of the employees can have their own batch, and they can go out and record their hourly transactions in the job journal. And when they post this, this will come in exactly the same way as it did in the last illustration that I showed. It will post these against the available time on each of these two jobs, job 60, job 80. So all we'd have to do is do a post, and we could post these hours out here. I'm not going to do that right now because I'm going to show you another way that we can do this. So the other way that we can do this is through a program that Business Central has called Timesheets, and I've set up some timesheets for Catherine out here. And notice Catherine is a resource, and we have 20 hours of project management time for Catherine on this particular job, which is job number J-00080. And the reason I'm showing you this is after we get done posting this, you'll see that there will be remaining hours will be reduced by whatever we post. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter on timesheets, and we'll find a timesheet out here for Catherine. So there are 2 of them. I'm going to use this one. And so she opens up her timesheet, and this is going to be a job. And it's going to be job number 80, the same one that we've been working on here. And the task is going to be 2220 project management. And on Monday she worked, let's say, 4 hours on this job. And on Tuesday she worked another 2. And we could have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so on and so forth. And in here, this totals up her hours for the week in terms of how many hours she's worked on this particular job. So once she has her whole week filled out, I'm just going to do this one job in 6 hours against it. But what Catherine would do is she'd fill out her entire workload for the week, allocating her hours out to all the jobs she worked on. And hopefully then on Monday we get 8 hours, and Tuesday 8, and so on and so forth, or 10, whatever she happens to be working. And when this is finished and she has this all correct, and remember we're only doing 6 hours here against this one job, she would submit this for approval. So it says, do you want to submit this? And you say yes. This means that she's certified that her time for the week is correct. And this now goes over to an approval system. So once the time has been submitted, we go out, and a manager would then go in and approve all of the weeks of work for the various employees. So I'm going to look at timesheets, and I'm going to go to Manage Timesheets here, and I see I have a timesheet for Catherine on the 30th. So I'm going to pull this up. And I see I have these 6 hours, and normally this would be 40 hours or more. She'd be posting things and all sorts of stuff, but I'm just going to approve this. So do you want to approve it? And I say yes. And so this time has now been approved to this job. So what I can do now is I can actually go out and I can pull this in to be posted against my job. So I could go out and do a search for job journal, and open this up in my dialog box, and I have my default batch here. I can just go to Actions, Functions, Suggest Lines from Timesheets, and here I could put in a starting and ending date, which I already have filled in. You would normally, maybe if you were the manager for this, you would just do a single job. I'm doing a job and a task, and then I'm going to simply click the OK button to create my journal lines. So this brought in the records from the timesheet for Catherine, and I have these on the 30th and the 31st, 4 hours and 2 hours. I need a document number here, so I'm just going to enter in a doc number. I can assign a number series to these so that I don't have to do this, but I didn't have one assigned in this demo project, so I'll just put in this document number, and I have my cost, I have my selling price, so everything should post correctly to my job. All I have to do is go up to post. I'm going to select both lines here first. Make sure that I get both of these. I'm just going to go to post. And it'll ask me if I want to do this. I'm going to say yes. And it's now posted this activity to my job. So if I close this up and I take a look, now I have 14 hours remaining of my resource for Kathleen. And again, when I do my periodic whip, it'll pick all of this up. I can go out and invoice for this. I can invoice multiple lines at one time, all of the things that we've basically talked about doing in the Jobs module. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, remember to click below and subscribe for more.